No one could calm the billionaire's autistic son until a waitress did the impossible. That day, the entire restaurant tried. The manager tried. The staff tried. Even a specialist on the phone tried. Nothing worked. A 6-year-old boy was screaming under the table, shaking, repeating the same word like his body was trapped in a storm. And his father, a man who could buy anything, stood there helpless. Then a waitress walked over. No training, no diploma, no plan. Just an apron and a calm that didn't make sense in the middle of chaos. And what she did in the next minutes changed a family forever. The restaurant was expensive, the kind with soft music, warm lighting, and people who whispered instead of speaking. Until the screaming started, the boy, Eli, was under the table, curled up on the floor, hitting his hands against his legs, repeating, "No, no, no, no." His breathing was fast, his face was red, his eyes were squeezed shut. For Eli, this wasn't bad behavior. It was overload. The sounds hurt, the lights hurt, the voices stacked on top of each other until his body couldn't take it anymore. And the worst part, people didn't understand. A woman at the next table frowned and whispered, "Control your child." Another customer stood up, annoyed, asking to move seats. The manager approached with a forced smile, then quickly backed away when Eli screamed louder. A waiter tried to speak gently. Eli slapped a cup off the table. Glass shattered. Everyone froze. And standing beside the table was Eli's father, Graham West, early 30s, perfect suit, luxury watch, the kind of man people recognized without knowing his name. A billionaire, the richest man in the room, and in that moment, the most powerless. He tried to crouch down. "Eli, it's okay, it's okay." But his voice sounded wrong, too fast, too anxious, like he wanted the screaming to stop more than he wanted his son to feel safe. Eli screamed again. Graham's jaw tightened. He looked around and saw the eyes on him. Judgment, disgust, curiosity. The billionaire had money, but no control over his own child. That's when the waitress set her tray down. Her name was Nina, mid-20s, simple uniform, hair tied back, no jewelry, no drama. She walked over without being called. The manager hissed from behind the bar, "Nina, don't stop. That family is—" But Nina didn't stop. She approached slowly, not smiling, not talking, not asking questions. She crouched near the edge of the table, but not too close. Then she did something that confused everyone. She just stayed still. No sudden movements, no reaching, no "hey buddy." Just silence. A full minute. The restaurant was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in glasses. Graham stared at her. "Who are you?" he asked, sharp and suspicious. Nina didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on Eli. Only on Eli. Eli was still shaking. Still repeating, "No, no." But something changed, because for the first time, nobody was trying to force him out of his storm. Nina breathed slowly. Then she hummed. No words, no song people recognized, just a soft, steady melody, like a heartbeat. At first it sounded like nothing. Then Eli's screaming lowered, one level, then another. His breathing slowed, and within moments, the boy stopped hitting his legs. People stared like they were watching a magic trick. Graham leaned closer, voice tense. "What are you doing?" Nina spoke quietly, still not looking at him. "I'm waiting for him to notice me." Graham didn't understand, but something in her tone made him shut up. Because she wasn't performing. She was present. Eli turned his face slightly. He didn't look into Nina's eyes. He looked at her hands. Nina noticed immediately. She placed her palm on the floor, open, facing up. No pressure, no demand, just an invitation. Eli stared at her hand for a long time. The entire restaurant held its breath. Then, Eli placed one finger on her palm, just one. But to anyone who understands sensory overload, that was huge. Graham's throat tightened. He looked away fast because he didn't want anyone to see his eyes filling. Nina whispered, "Hi, Eli." Then she stayed there, calm, steady, until Eli slowly sat up. He crawled back to his chair. No screaming, no collapse. A collective breath moved through the restaurant. Graham stood frozen. "How did you know?" he asked. Nina finally looked at him, and she said something simple that hit harder than any therapist report. "Your son doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be understood." Graham's face changed. Not anger, not pride, shame. Because deep down, he knew he had been trying to fix his son for years. What nobody knew was that Eli had never met his mother. Not really. Eli's mom, Sienna, had died during childbirth. Complications, a hemorrhage. Doctors tried for hours. But she didn't make it. And Graham never recovered. He buried his grief so deep he built a mansion on top of it. He hired nannies, therapists, specialists with expensive words. But emotionally, he was gone. Because looking at Eli felt like looking at the woman he lost. And it hurt too much. So he worked and worked and worked, telling himself, "I'm providing." But the truth, he was escaping. And Eli didn't need comfort. He needed a father. The dinner ended differently than it began. Eli ate, calm. Graham barely touched his food. He kept watching Nina like she was a mystery. Before leaving, he approached her near the bar. He pulled out cash. A lot of it. 5,000, he said, "for what you did." Nina looked at the money, then gently pushed it back into his hand. "I don't need it." Graham blinked. People always took his money. Always. Why?" he asked, stunned. Nina's voice stayed quiet. "Because I didn't do it for money." She stepped back. "Good night, Mr. West." And she walked away. At the door, Eli stopped, turned his head, found Nina, and gave her a tiny wave, barely visible. Nina waved back. Graham felt something pull inside his chest. Something he hadn't felt since the day his wife died. Hope. The next day, Graham came back. Alone. Quiet time. Less noise. He sat with a coffee and waited until Nina finished a table. When she approached, he didn't pretend. "I need to understand what you did yesterday." Nina sat down in front of him. Something waitresses don't do. But she did. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "You did what 15 specialists couldn't," Graham replied. Nina paused, then repeated it, slowly. "He doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be understood." Graham swallowed. "How do you know all this?" Nina exhaled, and here came the first part of her secret. I grew up with autism in my house, she said. Graham leaned forward. My brother? Nina continued. He was autistic. Severe. And the way she said was made Graham's stomach drop. Where is he now? He asked. Nina's face shifted, just a little. That's a long story. Graham didn't blink. I have time. Nina's voice lowered. You might have time, but I'm not sure I have courage. She stood up and walked away, leaving Graham stuck there, thinking. Graham came back again, and again, sometimes with Eli. Eli still struggled with noise, but when he saw Nina, his shoulders relaxed, like his body recognized safety before his mind did. Nina brought small things for him, a soft stress ball, colored dough, a sketchbook, simple, cheap, but chosen with care. Graham watched and realized something painful. Nina was giving his son what money never could: time, patience, understanding. One day the manager, Claudia, approached. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Nina, tables are waiting. Nina stayed calm. I'll be there in a minute. Claudia's voice sharpened. Now. Eli sensed the tension. His hands tightened. Graham stepped in. Can you give her 1 minute? Claudia's fake smile returned. Of course, Mr. West, but Nina has obligations. Nina stood up without arguing. Before leaving, she whispered something to Eli. And in seconds, he calmed. Graham realized something. Nina wasn't only calming his son, she was protecting him from the world. That night, Graham waited outside the restaurant after her shift. Nina walked out the back door and froze when she saw him. I need to hear the rest, he said. Nina looked at the quiet street, then made a choice. Not here, she said. They walked to a nearby park bench. Nina held her bag tight, like armor. My brother's name was Matteo, she began. Graham noticed immediately, past tense. My mom left when I was 14, Nina said. He was 8. She spoke without drama, like someone who already cried all her tears years ago. I learned everything myself. How to calm him, how to predict a meltdown. Graham swallowed. And my father, Nina continued, walked out when he got the diagnosis. Those words hit Graham like a mirror, because emotionally, he had done the same thing to Eli. What happened to Matteo? Graham asked. Nina turned her face away, then said it. He died 2 years ago. Graham's chest tightened. Heart complication. Nina whispered. Nobody diagnosed it in time. She finally looked at him. That's why I didn't take your money that night. Her voice shook, because what I did for Eli wasn't work. It was everything I couldn't save with Matteo. Silence. Heavy. Real. Graham looked away so she wouldn't see his eyes. But there was still one more twist coming, and neither of them was ready. Claudia had been watching. A billionaire, a waitress, a child, daily visits. In Claudia's mind, it could only mean one thing: a scam. She called Graham and fed him a story that Nina was neglecting work, that she was asking co-workers to cover her shifts, that she was using his son to get close to him. Graham listened, silent. He didn't believe it fully. But a seed of doubt is dangerous. That afternoon, he came in colder, less warm, more distant. Nina noticed instantly. What happened? She asked softly. Nothing, he answered. Eli looked up at the tension, then did something that stunned both of them. He placed his hand on Nina's hand and said a full sentence, rare for him in public. Nina. Good. Graham looked at his son, then at Nina, and the doubt began to die. But right then, Graham's phone rang, a number he hadn't seen in years, a name from the past, and in seconds, everything would connect. The caller was Daniel Vargas, his late father's former accountant. Graham stepped outside. Mr. West? Daniel said, voice trembling. I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago. What is it? Graham asked. Daniel took a breath. Do you know the waitress's name? Graham's stomach tightened. Nina, he said. Nina Carter. Daniel went quiet. Then, her brother, Mateo, was a patient at a charity autism clinic. Graham frowned. So? Daniel's voice turned heavy. That clinic was shut down. By your father. Graham's blood ran cold. Daniel explained, years ago, Graham's father closed a non-profit clinic that supported low-income families with autism services. Documents were manipulated, funding cut, land sold. Families lost everything. And Nina's brother, Daniel said, he was one of them. Graham's body went still, because in that moment he understood. Mateo's loss wasn't only poverty, it was also his family's decision. Graham hung up and walked back into the restaurant with a face Nina had never seen before. Guilt, shock, and a truth too big to swallow. I need to talk to you, Graham said to Nina. They sat. He told her everything, every detail. Nina listened without speaking. When he finished, she stayed quiet. Her eyes were on the floor. Did you know? She asked, voice small. Graham shook his head hard. No, I swear I didn't. Nina inhaled and said something that shocked him. I believe you. He blinked. If you knew, Nina said you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be changing. Graham's throat tightened. I can't bring Mateo back, he said. No, Nina replied. I know. Graham took a breath. But I can do something. Nina looked up. I can reopen the clinic. Her eyes widened. The land, the property. It's still in our family holdings. Graham continued. The project never happened. I can return it. I can rebuild it. Nina covered her mouth. Tears finally broke free. Eli walked over holding his sketchbook. He opened it in front of Nina. A simple drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands, and one word written in messy letters. Family. Nina dropped to her knees and hugged him. Graham watched and realized this wasn't just redemption. This was destiny paying a debt. 3 months later, the clinic reopened. Bigger, staffed, funded. Nina wasn't a waitress anymore. She became the coordinator for family support because nobody understood those families like her. At the opening event, Claudia came. Invited by Graham, she walked in confident until she saw Nina on stage with Graham and Eli. Claudia's face drained because Nina wasn't a waitress trying to climb. She was the reason the clinic existed. Graham held the microphone. This clinic exists, he said, because a simple waitress taught me something. He looked at Nina. Money isn't power. He paused. Love is. The room applauded, but the real ending came later. 6 months later, a quiet Saturday. Graham knelt in his living room holding a ring. Eli stood beside him holding a small red flower he picked himself. Nina's voice shook. "You don't have to do this." Graham looked up. "I do. Because you saved my son, and you saved me." Nina's eyes filled. Eli stepped forward and offered the flower. "Please," Eli whispered. Nina covered her mouth, then nodded. "Yes." A simple wedding. No huge show. Only the people who mattered. And at the moment the officiant said they were married, Eli stood up, walked to Nina, looked at her with calm eyes, and said the word nobody expected. "Mom." Nina fell to her knees and hugged him. Graham cried. Guests cried. Even the officiant wiped tears. Because sometimes love doesn't need a degree. It needs someone brave enough to kneel on the floor and wait. If this story touched you, leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories.